Hello, good evening, everybody. It's the Licensing and Gambling Acts Committee meeting on Monday, the 10th of February, 6 p.m. And I'd like to open the meeting. Do we have any apologies for today? None that we're aware of. Okay. Any declarations of interest at all? No. Okay. Well, then in which case we proceed to our first item, which is on fees and charges. And we've got Katie Thorpe, who's going to, from the Licensing Authority, present the first report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' agreement on the Licensing and Gambling Acts Committee licensing fees and charges for the 2025 to 2026 financial year. All fees under the Licensing Act are set by statute and are therefore not available for amendment. Fees under the Gambling Act are either set by statute and not available for amendment or set to the statutory maximum. It is proposed that for this financial year, no substantial variation to the current fees and charges is made in order to provide financial stability to licence holders in the current economic climate. The only changes proposed fall within the miscellaneous charges and can be found at paragraph 6 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to open. Joe, please take a seat. Yeah. I think we're going to ask any questions on the report. I've got two. So Councillor Muddiman, we've got Councillor Ottino and Councillor Upton. Thank you. Councillor Muddiman, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I'm having trouble signing in, so I haven't got it in front of me. But from memory, you had put a small increase on most of the fees, and on one set of fees, you had put no increase at all. Is that right? Or am I thinking of this, the numbers for this one or the next one?
I think it may be the other fees and charges for the other committee.
Okay, yes, okay. Apologies. I'll come back to it. Hopefully I'll have signed in by then. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Ottino, please.
I've got a similar question. I've thought as well that there's 0% increase on quite a lot of the fees on this report. And I was just wondering, have the costs gone up to administer it? Or, so, I mean, are we going to be making a loss out of the fact that we haven't raised the charges? Or if costs have gone up, did we not need to raise the charges by the equivalent amount?
Katie or Joshua, would you like to? Yeah. Go ahead, Joshua.
Apologies, my microphone was not working. The fees and charges, the majority of fees and charges for the Licensing and Gambling Act are set in statute, Councillor, so we have no authority to increase them. The question, will we make a loss, is we will do our very best to come out at 0 at the end of the year. And the way we'll have to do that is where costs have gone up, we would have to reduce activities that are more discretionary, such as the level of enforcement on licensed premises or the manner in which. So yes, costs have gone up to administer the Licensing and Gambling Act committee. However, legislation does not allow us to increase the fees for them.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Upton.
Thank you. Thank you for a really clear report, first of all. I love the reports. They're always, this is the problem, this is what we need to do about it, or these are the options, and this is our advice. Really good. And you pulled out the one bit that had changed just for us to look at, which was what I'm just curious, the viewing of films requiring certification per 15 minutes, do we really, every cinema that has a film that has to be certified, we can charge them £12 for every 15 minutes it's on? How does that charge work?
So that charge is made out in strictly officer time, for one. And it's generally actually divided down per minute of the film, because most films aren't in nice, neat increments of the 15 minutes. So it's divided backwards. And then it's an officer physically sat, signed out of all other work to watch the film with pen and paper, following the BBFC guidance to provide it with a classification. Then once that film has been finished, then that recommendation for that classification needs to be recommended for authorization and then signed off through the usual approval process. And then a certificate is physically created and sent out to the applicants so they can show their film locally with a classification. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so is that Oxford-based films that are first coming out, or would you do that for Star Wars Park 25?
Unfortunately, the larger Hollywood films generally seek their classifications directly from the BBFC. These are for films that are shown locally that haven't sought a national classification. And generally they're small film festivals or little independent films being shown at smaller cinemas generally. Often quite obscure topics and not always necessarily in English. So yeah, no, we don't get the Avengers Part 3. We do, however, get small independent films.
Do we have any final questions on this point? No, in which case then we're being asked to agree the licence fees and charges for 2025-26 set out and recommend for council to adopt. So may I see a raise of hands for all those in favour of adopting this? Yeah, thank you. I think that is carried. Lewis, Mohammed, are you in favour? Yeah, okay, yeah. Unanimous, thank you. So we'll move on then to the next item, which is the cumulative impact assessment update. And I would request, is it Joshua or Katie, you're doing this again? Thank you, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the consultation requirement in respect of the 3-yearly review of the cumulative impact assessment. A cumulative impact assessment is a tool used when considering adoption of the special saturation policy. The council are required, before the end of each relevant period, to consider whether or not it remains of the opinion stated within any current cumulative impact assessment. The opinion stated within the 2022 to 2025 assessment is that the number of licensed premises and club premises certificates within the city centre and East Oxford areas does have a cumulative impact, and that it is likely that the granting of further licences or variations to licences would be inconsistent with the authority's duty to promote the licensing objectives. A copy of the current cumulative impact can be found at Appendix 1. Section 5A8 of the Licensing Act 2003 states that before deciding whether it remains of the opinion, the licensing authority must consult with those persons detailed in paragraph 9 of the report. Following the consultation period, the officers will evaluate the responses received and any evidence provided. The committee will be presented with an amended cumulative impact assessment and an equality impact assessment to enable consideration as to whether the authority remains of the opinion or is no longer of the opinion set out in the current assessment. The committee is therefore recommended to instruct officers to carry out a consultation to review the cumulative impact assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the report. Any questions on this? Councillor Clarkson? Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. One for Katie. I mean, looking at all the data that backed up the previous cumulative impact assessment, we would presumably get equivalent data from the police and from the NHS to, and that's presumably readily available, because obviously this is 2020, which was an odd year anyway in terms of people going out and about and things anyway. So we would get data from 2024, presumably.
Yes, so the police and the health service are two of the consultees. So I would assume that they would provide that sort of data again, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other, Councillor Ottino and then Councillor Upton.
So, and the final decision will come back to this committee. You'll just write a report with recommendations, yeah?
Yeah, so we'll carry out an 8-week consultation period, put it all into another report, draft a new cumulative impact assessment, and then it will be back before this committee to make a decision.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you. In the the data from the last one, there's a little red dot quite often in Littlemore. And I just wondered, so for example, on page 30, analysis of violent crime, well, obviously you can see a lot in the city centre and along Kyler Road. Is it the acute mental health hospital? Ah, okay, right. Probably doesn't come under this licensing committee. Thank you. Yeah, I just wondered if there was going to be any need or argument to look at that as an area. That sounds. Thank you. Simon's answered my question.
Thank you. Councillor Mundy, then Councillor Muddiman, and then thank you.
All right, thank you. So obviously, looking at the previous data, it's welcome to see some of those stats coming down, including in the city centre. I wanted to ask a question about the police's input, really, and obviously, notwithstanding the objectives, the licensing objectives, which you obviously have to stick to, and just taking into account that we've had a drop in the number of licensed premises. Do we think that the police is impacted by their own resourcing implications when they are feeding back for the cumulative impact assessment? And I'm only saying this as I'm not saying that this is my view, but are the police potentially struggling to maintain their own responsibility to uphold law and order and protect children and ensure that those licensing objectives are adhered to, and therefore making a representation that would support not increasing licensed premises in those areas? Thank you.
Okay, he's kindly thrown the question to myself. It's okay. It's a very difficult question to answer. One is because we're not the police. I can't really speak to police resourcing, police operations, how they are responding necessarily. I can't even speak to what representation they may or may not make in regards to the cumulative impact assessment or any subsequent special saturation policy. What I would say is the purpose of the cumulative impact assessment is to assess the raw data, to look at what information there is, what stats we can get from as many resources as possible. And Councillor Clarkson mentioned, would we get similar as previously? We would hope so. We can't guarantee it because we can only throw out as many lines as possible and see who bites, essentially. But I would hope that the data we were able to receive from the police, much of which is publicly available anyway and won't require additional analysis from the police themselves and their personal input about cumulative impact. Hopefully that will indicate what direction you should take for any potential special saturation policy, rather than just relying upon a police representation about what they feel should or should not be in place.
Thank you. We have, I think, Councillor Muddiman next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Just one query on page 26 of the report, section 5, the third box down in section 5, which is part of the police crime trend data, the top 4 lower super output areas, LSOAs. In the third box down, for public order, the data on public order, I've just got a query at the third line, Jericho and Osney, which is partly my ward. The numbers have gone up enormously, like many hundreds of percents between 2018 to 2021. So, and I'm guessing that's the number of public order incidents in that ward. And I just wondered whether you have any information on what, or do I need to talk to the police about why those numbers have gone up so hugely?
The information that we gathered, a lot of it is on public police data websites, I guess, isn't it? So we won't have individual data on those incidents. So it would be the police that you would need to speak to regarding that. But I'd imagine if the numbers are increasing and Jericho and Osney are one of the top 4 areas, it will be on our report again that we can share. So that data will be brought back to this committee anyway.
Thank you. I think we had another point here. Mary, you had your hand still before as well.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, it was
it's-
just on the issue of police resourcing. And I know that certainly when we've been dealing with specific planning applications, the police have sometimes come along, particularly in the context of allowing really late opening for nightclubs till 3 in the morning. They say, well, we haven't got the resources. And we've discounted that by saying we have to judge on the merits of the application. It can't be for us to take on board police resourcing. That can't be a factor we can take into account. So.
Councillor Ottino, please.
So in this consultation, is it going to be based on exactly the same areas? Because I noticed it doesn't look like the Westgate Centre, for instance, is in the area. Or is it just going to be a consultation generally, and then you'll draw conclusions whether you would put the Westgate Centre or potential development down by the ice rink that might be coming at some point?
And actually, maybe before you answer that, just because I have a question on the same, which is to what extent can we encourage other areas to be considered beyond those that are currently in scope of the special saturation policy? Thank you.
So the cumulative impact assessment can, the data and the evidence that we gather can reduce the size of the areas. It can highlight new areas that to be considered as well. So that'll be all part of that consultation and the evidence and the data that we receive to be considered. So yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Max, please.
Thank you. I hope you won't mind me jumping in and drawing on my expertise as a senior lecturer in criminology, but as someone who teaches on public criminology around these issues, I'm aware that police crime statistics are notoriously unreliable. So I was just wondering whether there would be other sources of data that would be drawn on, such as victim surveys, which tend to capture the reality of crime a bit more accurately.
Thank you.
The short answer is we will take as much as we can possibly get. The idea of the consultation is to gather as much information as possible. And if I could lean on your expertise, if there are any particular groups or contacts when this goes out to consultation that you could push this towards, that would be incredibly helpful to get that additional information. It's also not solely based on police data. It is also the NHS data and other fire data. And as much as we can get, it's to paint a picture of cumulative impact rather than just a picture of this is where crimes happen to be getting reported in an area.
Thank you. Councillor Madiman.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, I see one of the sections on the consultee list is residents and local businesses and residents. So I understand how it's quite easy to consult with local businesses within that area. How are you going to consult residents? What's the process?
So we'll be putting the consultation on our website and social media. I believe there's a QR code that we can get created, so we can advertise that in the town hall as well. So yeah, social media, I guess, mainly will be for the residents, yeah.
May I add, I will also ask that once it is a live public consultation, we will circulate those details to the full committee. And if you could then pass them to your entire wards through whatever means you can, the more we get this out, the better the response is that we get back.
Thank you. Any further clarifications? Can't see anyone else, in which case then we're being asked to recommend to instruct officers to carry out this consultation to review the cumulative impact assessment. So are all of us in favour? Please raise your hand if you're in favour. Okay, thank you. So in which case, I think that was everybody. We therefore are recommending that you go ahead with this. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time and good luck with that. I'm sure we'll take on board these points that you've raised regarding distribution and the alternative data sets as well. So I don't know if we can note that, I think specifically in the minutes that we've highlighted that this is of value and that we would like you to explore that. So our next agenda item is the minutes of the previous meeting. So has anyone got any amendments or additions on the previous meeting? Thank you, Councillor Lyde.
Just a small minor point. I thought I'd said my apologies. I was of Newcastle, but it's not recorded.
Okay, we can amend that if that is the case. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, in which case then the minutes of the previous meeting are approved and the dates of the future meetings. I think the next meeting will be on the 21st of May, which is after our annual council. So it will be a new committee and a new composition. And so thank you very much for your time, everyone. Thanks to the officers for their work on this and good luck with the consultation. Thank you. We'll take 5 minutes break now, just before we've got the next licensing committee and we're handing over to Edward.
Yeah. Right, when everybody's ready, we'll start the next meeting. Okay, so we're good to go with the General Purposes Licensing Committee. And we'll obviously, I'm Chair Edward Mundy. We'll start with apologies for absence. Looks like everybody's here. I don't know. Maybe it's the week of the budget. Is that it? Yeah. So moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. I'll just, unless anybody else has got anything to say on that one, I will say that the public speaker today, Mr. Khan, did phone me on the telephone today, and I did speak to him. He just really wanted to ask me about the administration side of the meeting today and talk to me about these pictures that you've got in front of you. And I recommended that he send them to the officers with his public representation. But obviously I didn't discuss with him any intentions that I might have, or whether the views that I would form at this meeting would be formed here, and they would never be formed in any conversation that I have with him prior to here. So we'll move on to item 3 if there's nothing else on that. And that is fees and charges. So that's, yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' agreement on the general purposes licensing fees and charges for the 2025 to 2026 financial year. For commercial events and events with no commercial element, including street parties, the fees have increased approximately 4% to cover the authority's costs. It is important to note, however, where an application meets the test for being a community or charitable event with no commercial gain, the fee can be waived by the authority to support that event. For scrap metal dealers, this is an executive function with the responsibility sitting with the Cabinet. The fees were submitted to Cabinet for consultation and are due for approval. However, they're included in this report for members to note only. For sex establishments and sexual entertainment venues, the fees have increased approximately by 4% to cover the authority's costs. And for hackney carriage and private hire licensing, the fees have also increased on average by 4% to cover the authority's costs. I am also aware there's a public address that came in, which I received the written version of at 4 p.m. So I've tried my very best to be prepared for any potential questions you may have in regards to that. But please be reminded, I may not have the full breadth of time to have gathered everything you may want, but I will do my very best. The only thing I'll say up front before questions about that is I'll also let the committee know that between 2018 and 2023, there were no increases to the taxi licensing fees to support the trade, and only from the 2023-2024 year did those fees start increasing incrementally again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Josh. Right, so do we have any questions or comments on the report on fees and charges? Okay, so are we ready to welcome in the public speaker? No? Yeah? Yeah, okay. I haven't perhaps given everyone a chance.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, everyone, yeah, okay. So if we introduce Mr. Khan, yeah, thank you.
Chair, as a representative of the hackney carriage trade of Oxford, I've come here to object to the level of increase in the hackney carriage licence fees proposed today by licensing. I fail to understand how the officer can justify this amount of increase, especially in light of Uber gaining an operator's licence and how that will impact the already struggling trade. Botley Road closure, not opening till October 2026, closure of nightclubs in Oxford, the investment in 2026 where we have to purchase an electric taxi. So now was not the appropriate time to propose this level of increase of the fees. It's not just about licensing duties or enforcement. What about the review of taxi ranks? We have been asking since 2021 for a review of the Gloucester Green taxi rank in terms of appropriate signage at the coach station and one at the taxi rank itself, including markings on the ground at the Gloucester Green rank. To date, nothing has been done. It's been 4 years. That's a serious delay which has been impacting our trade. Both of the increases in February 2024 and today have been proposed at times when the trade has been pressured by licensing. Last year, February 2024, when we asked for an extension on the emission standards policy, we had an increase of over £30 on vehicle licence fee and around £30 on driver licence fee. Again, a year later today, the increase proposed is an extra £20 on vehicle licence fee and an extra £20 on driver licence fee. This is having a negative impact on our drivers, and if the fee continues to increase at this rate, it could be at levels that harm the drivers, especially those that drive for proprietors, who won't be able to afford the fees, and as owners, forcing the trade to increase the tariff, which we want to avoid as much as possible, and undoubtedly impact the paying passenger. There doesn't seem to be a balance for us. As of December 2024, UK RPI was 3.5%. The licensing are proposing an increase of 4% today. I fail to understand why this increase is above the RPI rate. There has been no reasons given for these rises apart from inflationary pressures. What specific duties constitutes this levels of increase? We believe the cost of administrating the licensing department has decreased, not increased, as everything is done online, and the service provided by the licensing department in some cases has got progressively worse, not better, because of the delays in renewing some license applications. This means that drivers are forced off the road whilst the application team and the licensing officers communicate with each other or exchange documents. This includes very limited time of 2 days to pick up a renewal license plate from the town hall. I have also included photos, which I hope all of you have had the opportunity to view, of taxis queuing up at the taxi ranks during what should have been a busy period, but very quiet. Included are a couple of photos of an illegal rank of private hire vehicles, including out-of-town taxis on St. Aldate's. This proves that the level of enforcement is poor and the private hire operator in question has not been challenged on the behaviour of their drivers. The private hire operators are ignoring the behaviour of their licensed drivers and more concerned about revenue. So for this reason, as such, we object to this level of increase in light of the above concerns. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Do we have any questions for Mr. Khan, the public speaker? Or indeed for Josh? Yeah. Yes. So, just.
Regards to enforcement, I'm aware that, the council carry out nightly teams to go out on a regular basis. When's the last time that we've been out to check the vehicles, check the drivers, check if they're right? And over the years, what was the average time? Over the years, how many times a year did we go out on average, and where is that now? First question.
Sure. As I said, I'll try with what I can in terms of the data that I can't pull now. But that's one question that I did try and get some for. In terms of only out of hours operational work for compliance or enforcement, that only relates to the taxi trade, so not including any daytime enforcement, reactive work throughout the day, or scheduled work throughout the day, and not including any operations that do mixed licensing work, say we do premises stuff and taxi work, or maybe we go to a gambling premise and then go visit a taxi rank. Discounting all of that, taxi alone is in the 24 to 25 financial year, we allocated and completed 140 hours of officers' time throughout that 24-25 year for just that out of hours compliance and enforcement.
Thank you.
There's a follow-up to the answer there, sorry. Thank you.
Sorry. The last time we went out and did taxi enforcement was Friday just gone as well.
You have a follow-up, Jess? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So thanks for answering part of the question. but comparatively to years previous, so let's say before COVID, for example, how many hours were you putting in then? I get the fact that you did 140 hours in this financial year, but in previous years, was it a lot higher, or is that the average?
Unfortunately, I can't speak to that. I wasn't able to get any historic data for out of hours work between 4 p.m. and now.
Okay, thank you. Louise?
Thank you, Chair. So questions, some for Josh and some for Mr. Carr. First of all, so just to be clear on the raises we made in the taxi charges over the last, since I think you mentioned back to 2018. So was it kind of 0% for several of those years? And then last year was, could you remind me what it was last year? And then you said and so this year we're looking at maybe 4%, which is above inflation this year.
Of course. So this year's proposed 4% increase. Remember, these figures are on average. Prior, as Mr. Khan stated, it was 8%. Before that, it was 5%. And then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years preceding that, there were no increase to taxi licensing fees, other than miscellaneous charges, such as cost for printing supplementary documents, that kind of thing. But to actual license fees, none.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've got, sorry, I'll let Louise have a follow-up, and then we'll start taking the questions in groups, because we've got a few hands up now, so.
Thank you. And the other question was, you mentioned that there's been delays in getting things approved. Could you just elaborate on that a bit, whether that's actually been, if that's had an impact on somebody's ability to go out and earn their living?
Yes. We're having to put other information in there which is irrelevant to that renewal application. And if it goes to the taxi applications team, depending on what day it arrives, there could be a delay in the application, even viewing the application, or the application going to the licensing for verification, if I've got that correct. And so during that time, it could take 5 days. And if there's some issue with the application, or the picture isn't clear, or there's something missing, that'll go back to the driver, asking him to send in the relevant information, then another few delays, and by the time you know it, he's already run out of time. So he's sat at home over the weekend, waiting for an update.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we'll go Councillor Miles, then Councillor Clarkson, then Councillor Atina. So we'll just take 3 questions, if you don't mind to answer those together. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question, the 2 parts of this to Joshua. One is, if you could clarify just for us the pricing controls that we have over Hackney carriages versus how the private hires price their rides. And then what are we doing to address this issue that has been raised around the loitering of private hire vehicles? So they're not just driving and picking up from the street, but they are effectively sort of doing that by just waiting for a call to come in, but just waiting in an area alongside a rank that has been described. And I guess this connects to this Wolverhampton issue, that we've got an oversupply of private hires potentially operating, because they can be licensed anywhere and then come here. So I guess that is the 2 parts of the same question. Thank you.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, in terms of our charges for Hackneys and for private hires, do you know how we compare with other authorities?
Councillor Atina.
Yeah, I can see obviously our staffing costs will have gone up and some of our office costs will have gone up, but it's a suggestion that if applications are dealt with online, that will have saved us money. Has it saved us enough money to balance out the staffing costs and other costs, or is that not relevant in terms of the overall cost?
Perfect. Thank you. Josh, I think that's all for you.
I will try my very best. I apologise to any councillors if I skim over or miss any of your questions, so feel free to follow up with anything I have missed. Where to begin? In terms of the private hire versus Hackney carriage fees, there is different legislation and different requirements, just like there's conditions versus bylaws for private hire as Hackneys, and different requirements in terms of compliance and enforcement and the licensing process, which is why there is some disparity in terms of the fees themselves. In terms of your concern about illegal ranks or private hires, loitering and potentially applying for hire, I'll start by saying that any out-of-town vehicle, it is not within the remit of a licensing officer from Oxford City to deal with the vehicle from out of area, so much so that there is fees and charges cannot consider any way in which us to charge our own drivers or own vehicles to do enforcement of vehicles that aren't licensed by ourselves. The way we try and get around this as best as we can in terms of compliance and enforcement, we have very good relationships with our neighbouring authorities who join us regularly on our enforcement operations when we go out to do compliance. So when we do come across an out-of-town vehicle behaving in a way it shouldn't or breaching their conditions, which do differ from our conditions, then we have the correct licensing officer with us at the time to deal with that. It also works with different multi-agency operations that we do. For example, if we work with the traffic police, we can go out and we can therefore go out and pull over any vehicle operating in the city or approach any vehicle in the city. And even if we can't deal with their license conditions because we don't license them, the police are there to deal with general traffic enforcement through their powers, which is also great. That's also another operation we try and also get authority, the neighbouring authorities to join us on too. So we have as much joint work there as possible. As for illegal ranks, I understand that a line of private hire vehicles stopped on the road may appear an illegal rank, but it's not an illegal rank unless those vehicles are operating as a Hackney carriage vehicle or a Hackney carriage driver. If there is evidence that any one of those drivers has taken a passenger illegally, we fully investigate, and often that leads to some sort of prosecution. Generally, when we inspect locations that have long lines of private hires sat, they are generally, and I understand the photos given are of a much more prominent position. Usually they find a spot that's much less of a prominent position down a back street where it's less likely people will congregate, less likely people will come across them, therefore to try and limit the amount that members of the public who don't know the difference between the vehicles are less likely to approach, and therefore the temptation for those drivers that cannot apply for hire should hopefully be removed to some extent. Costs versus other authorities. Just for Oxfordshire, I think at the moment we're cheaper generally than South and Vale. I think Cherwell and West are then slightly cheaper than us in terms of fees. But we are currently, in terms of license fees, cheaper than South and Vale for their license fees. Obviously, there's an awful lot of licensing authorities to go further afield. I could find that detail with more time, but that's as close as I could get for this. Where else are we? The move online, has that saved money? The purpose for taking on Victoria Forms as an online application process was not to save money. It was to improve the customer experience and to speed up the process, of which it has. I understand Mr. Khan has made complaints about the time of processing. However, one thing I was able to look at before coming here today was some statistics in that 100% of applications are assessed within 3 working days. If valid, 100% are sent for consideration within 1 day. And if they are suitable to be authorised, 100% again, are then sent and issued within 1 working day. This does mean our current licence process for valid applications is 1 week, which is far, far better than the vast majority of authorities nationally. I was told just the weekend gone that the average licence process at the moment for Wolverhampton that was mentioned is somewhere up to 6 weeks on some occasions. However, I will acknowledge what Mr. Khan has said in regards to invalid applications. When an applicant has submitted an application and there are documents that are either missing or unclear or incorrect or out of date, or the list goes long, there's quite a lot of requirements for an applicant to submit with their application that all need to be validated to be deemed valid and move on to the next stage. It's at that stage where I would say the half of the applications do get stuck. What I was able to look at earlier was over the last 3 months, it is approximately half of applications submitted usually receive at least 1 invalid letter, is what we call it. How invalid that may be varies from application to application. It may be that it requires an awful lot of work. It may be that it just requires a short email response, and then that application is probably then valid to move on. But it's the lack of valid applications being received that is slowing down the process. But even on that, looking at the statistics for the licensing authority's response to invalid applications, it's incredibly quick. It's that at least that 3 working day KPI is met 100% of the time currently in response. Have I missed any of the councillors' questions?
I don't think so, but unless, yeah, okay. So now we'll take Asima and Max, and Ajaz wants another bite of the cherry. So that's the 3. Okay.
Okay, thanks so much. Just to say, for the handful of years when the fee was stagnant, when it didn't increase, I'm guessing that was because of COVID and kind of lack of demand then. Can I just check that before you've been proposing this 4% increase, that you've reviewed how much demand there is and how much income these taxi drivers are making to reflect that they can afford this increase? Because I saw that in 2020, the fee was about £400, and then with this increase, it will then go to £472. And £72 a year is quite a lot if there's still not a huge amount of pickup and customers that these taxi drivers have. And if the income is still quite low, then that's quite a big increase, really. Thank you.
Sorry, we'll move on to the next questions to take the group again. Max, thank you.
Thank you. My question is for our public speaker, Mr. Khan. You very eloquently spelled out lots of the financial pressures that Hackney Carriage drivers are under, things which are very much out of your control, things like the Botley Road closure, pressure from private hire cabs, and these photos have really clearly illustrated some of those problems. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and I can understand why there will be frustration around these rises. I was just wondering if you might be able to say a little bit more to us about any positive steps that the council could be taking, whether that's in relation to location of ranks, in relation to other measures in easing the process that you think it might be valuable for us to hear.
Thank you, Max. And Ajaz.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of follow-ups, really. First one was, during COVID, obviously there was no taxis actually probably working because they just couldn't. So they were still paying their license fees while they were not working. So I just want to clarify that. So over the period, it's like quite substantial because they weren't working for that time, but they were still paying. And secondly, I don't know if it's a question for the fees, but you mentioned about private hire loitering. As far as I know, and you can correct me, please, that private hires go from job to job, and when they don't have a job, they shouldn't be loitering, not on a back street, not on any street. They should be going back to their base. That's how I understand the law should work. And lastly, although you've gone online to increase customer satisfaction, I believe that probably that would have just made it more economical to run it as a sub side of having a better experience. So therefore, the benefit to to us as a licensing authority must mean that it was probably more economical, so therefore a little bit cheaper to run. So therefore, has any of that benefit, or can we not pass some of that benefit on, even though it was aimed at satisfaction, but financially we've had a better run because it's all gone online. So therefore, that's something that we should consider when we do that as well. Although the initial reason was to get a better experience, which your figures suggest that there are, but there has been a financial benefit. So maybe we can help the trade by passing some of that on.
Okay, thank you, councillors. If you're ready, Josh, we'll start with you unless, yeah, okay. And then Mr. Khan, if you've noted down the questions that were for you as well.
Unfortunately, the simple matter is the fee for taxi licensing is to reflect the work done and how much it costs to operate. The fee increase aligns with the rising costs of the council. It aligns with financial pressures, which include costs of salaries, utilities, other costs associated with the functions of the licensing authorities, beyond those that are immediately visible to those receiving the licenses or in the license process, including training and the list could go on. What I'm trying to explain is, while I understand the cost goes up and that's harder to address, the licensing authority is not permitted to function in the green. It functions at a cost recovery service, and that's what these fees reflect, is the cost recovery for what service we currently provide. If you don't mind, I'll jump to my next questions. During COVID, you said that was a hard, very difficult. During COVID, we spent a lot of money from the licensing budget to support the licensing trade. I'm so sorry that I don't have the exact examples here to give out, but where discounts were available or where we could support grants for drivers or vehicle owners, we were supportive of those through the other arms of the council wherever possible as well. Can a private hire vehicle loiter? A private hire vehicle is permitted to stop wherever it's a lawful stopping space. They can go to a car park, they can go around a corner, as long as they're not stopped on double yellows across a cycle lane doing something that contravenes traffic law. They are allowed to be around unless it's a prominent position. If it's a prominent position, we would move them on. And when we're out, we do move them on if they're in a prominent position, appearing to the general public like they may be available for hire. In regards to the online applications, I'm saying that surely that saved us money. No, the cost of that online service is, I apologise, I'm going to get quoted, I think it's £11,500 annually is the annual fee. That's not accounting for any of the setup fees and required officer time that was spent to procure and set up an online forms process. As of right now, the council has not made any money back off that investment. And there are other online initiatives the council has done, such as introducing the Taxi Plus process for the DBS system, which we used to be very manual, very difficult for the licensed trade to come in, physically do appointments. If those documents are wrong, they had to be sent away and come back. We now have moved that to an online system, which as of this year, the cost for that going forward should work out evenly. It should be an even cost recovery. However, the licensing authority did make the initial investment and didn't pass that initial investment charge onto the license trade. I think it was somewhere between £9,000 and £11,000 again that the authority paid up front to ensure our existing licensed trade all have their existing DBS certificates entered immediately onto the system, rather than waiting for the potentially 3 years for some drivers to then have access to that system. So the licensing authority paid up front for that access. So no, the cost of improvements to the customer experience, to the speed in which we process, that's not income, that's cost recovery thus far. Have I missed anyone's questions from myself?
I don't think so. I don't know if Mr. Khan wanted to answer to Max's comments.
back to that Carfax rank. We've always said that. Nowhere, majority of the towns and cities, you see a taxi rank in the centre of the city centre. You know, we don't have that. The high street is a hit and miss. There's complaints going in every single day to the enforcement team because somebody's obstructing it. So that's clearly an issue. The other rank is the Gloucester Green rank, and I can tell you now that it's not the same as it used to. Less and less people coming off the coaches, so you'll have cabs parked there for an average of 45 minutes to an hour. The only other main rank is this train station rank, and the train station rank, the photos are in front of you. That's the situation on the train station at the moment. You've got like 2, 3, 4 lines of taxis parked on a busy time, which should have been busy time, and I put a timestamp and a day on there. So this is the situation at the moment. I'm just saying this. I can welcome any one of you to come and, you know, invite any one of you to come and have a look. So the situation is dire, and I would say the one rank that would really help the trade is to have a rank at Carfax during the daytime. 3 cabs, you know, and enforce it, and that would work for the trade perfectly. That will really give the trade a boost. I hope I've answered the question.
I think maybe Josh has a something to.
If you don't mind, Chair, may I come in on that as well? I think I'd like to make very clear that the licensing department is fully supportive of as many Hackney ranks we can get in the city. The more Hackney ranks we can obtain in the city improves public safety. It's a direct correlation. If people have to travel, they'll have to walk not as far to find a Hackney, they will get home a lot safer. And on that point, with Carfax rank during the day, the licensing department is supportive of this. It's county council who decide at the end of the day where these ranks go, how they get marked up. And every time we're approached about, is this a good idea? Is this rank a good idea? We have never turned down a rank as a bad idea. We are always supportive of more ranks. We've recently introduced a new rank at the JR. I was in discussions earlier this week for proposals for a rank further down Cowley Road. I think Mr. Khan told us over the years that the Mansaway rank isn't in a great location. It would be much better if it was further into Cowley Road, and we've been supporting that proposal just last week. I would also like to say that Oxford City licensed Hackney carriages are the only vehicle that is lawfully allowed to ply for hire within the city district. That is, drive around and be hailed off the street rather than requiring a rank. We get a lot of complaints about unlawful plying for hire. And if the vehicles and the Hackney carriages were available on the street, away from the ranks, it may mean there are people that traveling public and members of the public have the ability to hail the correct vehicle. 9 times out of 10, when we do an investigation for a vehicle either out of town or a private hire licensed locally who is unlawfully applied for hire, it has been just simply a case of a member of the public has approached because that's the vehicle they want to approach. That's the vehicle they see, and they do go get in that vehicle, and it's an opportunistic crime that usually takes place. There are examples of that, not like at the train station. Sometimes someone will approach a Hackney, not like the idea of the fare, and then an offence will be committed when they can get a fare cheaper from someone who's willing to do it illegally. But generally speaking, Hackney carriages are permitted to drive around and be hailed from the street away from a taxi rank. Although it is the prime source of your work, I think you've said in your reports, it is not the only source of work for a Hackney carriage. And finally, the Hackney carriages can also complete private bookings as if they were their own operator and own private hire vehicle. So a Hackney carriage driver in a Hackney carriage vehicle has available to them a Hackney rank, applying for hire, and private bookings, whereas a private hire vehicle can only be given bookings given to them from a licensed operator. And an out-of-town vehicle can, if it's a Hackney, can operate via private bookings. Whether those private bookings come through an operator is allowed as well. But that's it. Once they're in our district, they can't apply for hire. They can't stop on a taxi rank. If anyone had any questions about those distinctions, I'm happy to answer more.
All right. Thank you very much. It's also worth pointing out that that new taxi ranks such as those that Mr. Khan suggested would be at the behest of the county council as the highways authority, because they would be on the public highway. So do we have any additional, so yeah, Councillor Yeatman, and any other questions? I know Councillor Miles has got a question as well. Councillor Ligo, so we'll because Councillor Miles has spoken already, we'll go Councillor Yeatman, Councillor Ligo, Councillor Miles. Thank you.
There was a mention of Uber, which was kind of, I'd been unaware of like the Uber license and if that was coming to Oxford. And obviously, are there any studies on the impact of Uber that we would be able to draw upon to understand the impact upon Mr. Khan and the Hackney hire and the private hire taxes?
Thank you, Councillor Yeatman. Councillor Ligo.
Thank you. Following up from your statement, what you said about the county council's responsibility, are you chasing up, or is anybody chasing up? And would it be wrong of me as a twin hatter to chase up, if that's okay?
As far as I understand,
Can we take the third question? Apologies, yeah. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, so just to, first to just comment, there's the Central Oxfordshire Movement and Place framework work that's going on at the moment, and I think they are looking at, and maybe Councillor Upton can correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you're involved in this, but looking at taxis and the use of public space around that, and that is something that's jointly being done by city and county, and in which case then the licensing team should be involved in those consultations, because that will consider locations for taxi ranks. But my question refers to the road closure fees, and that is separate from taxis, but it's in the same fees and charges schedule. So why is it that no commercial element road closures for street parties has gone up by 5.56%, whereas commercial ones, which are for 500 or more people, is only 3.89%, whilst the slightly smaller commercial ones are at a 4%. It just doesn't seem very kind of consistently increased rates. And I understand that the small street parties going from 18 to 19 pounds isn't a massive amount, it's £1, but at the same time, it just seems disproportionate compared to the lower level of increase for a mass event, which has got over 500 people. So could that be clarified? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So are they all for you, Josh, to answer? Yeah, okay, well, we'll give Josh a minute to just note down. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Uber. How to say this fairly? Uber hold a license with Oxford City Council. They are yet to utilise that license. As far as I'm aware, they have not launched in Oxford. And I don't know to what extent they've started their onboarding process or advertising amongst the trade looking for drivers to operate under their operator license. Are there any studies specifically about the impact of Uber into a city? Not that I'm aware of. However, the introduction of Uber realistically should not be considered vastly different to the introduction of any large operator to the city. One main difference in regards to the operation of Uber in the city compared to other operators who currently work within the city is up until now, Uber in the UK, and obviously I can't speak as to their business plans and this may change or may not, but as far as I'm aware, Uber have not passed work to Hackney carriages working cross-border. They only provide work to private hire vehicles that are operating under a private hire operator license in an area, and the private hire driver that operates. So Uber currently, their business model is to have that triple lock of licenses. The issue with that is when it is a large operator with far-reaching marketing, is a private hire operator can take a booking to take passengers from anywhere to anywhere within the UK. Usually, it stays much more local because it would be very expensive for a small operator to send a local driver across the country to do a job that's also across the country, which is where the difference of Uber to other operators. However, if the concern is an influx of additional drivers or additional vehicles, that's already a problem that Oxford City is having to deal with out-of-town vehicles, with 400 odd Hackney carriages currently being utilised in the city that aren't licensed by Oxford City. And that was before Uber held a licence at all. If it's in regards to competition, is it going to be a reduction in customers for other types of licensed trade, such as Hackney carriage? It may well be, but it is lawful. It is, Uber have applied for a license, they have met the conditions required, they've met the requirements, and that license was granted. Up until they are operating, it's difficult to say exactly what impact they will have on Oxford City itself. Does that help with the Uber question a little bit more? Hackney ranks, is it worth us chasing county? Sajid, you may be able to assist me with this one. As far as I'm aware, the Gloucester Green rank conversation, this isn't about the creation of a rank. There is a rank there already. It's about better marking of the rank so members of the public can see signs that point to where they need to go to get the Hackneys. That is currently in discussion, and I know there has been discussion back and forth where we've been supportive of this. I'm not sure where those discussions are at currently. So it may well be that a chase with the county on that front may very well be helpful. As for a Carfax rank, as far as I've seen, there hasn't been any formal submission or any formal request for a daytime rank at Carfax. It's a conversation that comes up frequently, I think, but it's never something isn't something that's been put down in writing, at least anytime recently. However, in terms of stakeholder management, I know I spoke to Sajjad recently about that rank, and I did give some advice about how I would approach presenting this to the county council, how I would approach justifying the use of Queen Street, for example, to access the rank through the day. So it's definitely not a case of us being sat on our hands, but is certainly the case of, I don't think county have anything to respond to yet because nothing has been provided to them for the rank itself. Road closure fees. Thank you, Councillor Miles. In terms of a percentage difference, I would say you're right, that 5.56% does appear significantly different to the 3.89% of the larger events. And I would say the increase of £1 is where that increase came from, and the percentage from that fell from the £1 increase rather than a percentage comparison against the other road closure. So the cost of processing a road closure with no commercial element, including street parties, is one that we already try to keep incredibly low, not to mention the potential complete fee waive when we can. However, that is an application that the council loses money every time we receive one. So an increase of £1 doesn't go towards the cost recovery, but does go towards cost recovery for road closures as a whole.
I think Councillor Miles asked about taxis and public spaces as well.
It was more of a note. I don't know whether.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, so are there any other questions or comments from the floor? So it's down to me now, so hopefully just the last couple of questions. So in relation to the ultra-low emission vehicle early adoption fees, so obviously at the moment they're significantly lower, it's sort of less than half the rate of the standard Hackney carriage vehicle. So is that level for the ultra-low emission vehicle going to come up to the current level for the Hackney carriage vehicles at the date when all vehicles need to comply with the ULEV standards, or is it going to change at the next point that we come to actually address the fees and charges again next year? My other question was to Mr. Khan, just in relation to the photos at St Aldate's. I just wanted to know if anybody, you may not know, but if anybody had reported these sorts of instances for either a private hire vehicle being in a prominent position or for waiting in an inappropriate place, which is obviously a bus stop would be not a lawful place to wait because it's a no stopping zone. And I think I did have another question, but I've forgotten it. So I'll just that's fine for now. Thank you. Oh, sorry, just to Mr. Khan. Just very quickly, because I've asked obviously Josh about this as well, whether just as a representative of the Polton members, whether you yourself welcome that difference between the charges for the ultra low emission vehicles relative to that of the current non-compliant HCVs. Thank you.
Would the electric vehicle fee apply to all vehicles from 1st of January 2026 is your question? Because at that point, all of our Hackney carriages should have transitioned. It's a very good question, of one I think is a good idea for debate, and I'm happy to take the committee's opinion on that matter. For any, yeah, I mean, to compare it to the private hire fees, there is currently a fully electric private hire fee that's also a reduction from other private hires. So yeah, I'm more than happy for the committee to discuss what exactly happens as of January 2026 with the fee in regards to a Hackney vehicle. Because currently there's a discount for electric vehicles.
I'll let Mr. Khan answer the questions I've asked for him, and then if we may have a recommendation for the report on the back of that. Okay, thank you. And if you had any views to express on my second question. Okay, so I mean, I'd just like to see if there's any comments from the committee really on whether we would like to see a forthcoming report from the licensing officers to ascertain the kind of the financial credibility of maintaining those charges at the ultra low emission standards level from January 2026, and whether that's obviously we've heard already that it has to effectively stay in the black. It can't go red. It can't go green in terms of the deficit or making money for the council. So, would the committee be minded to pursue a report from officers in terms of whether that was viable for the future for us to actually arrive at that level of fees for the Hackney carriage vehicles when it came to January 2026? Ajaz has got a comment.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say, because we're putting these in for a year, so therefore, whatever the fees, if it was approved or not, surely they would still be in place in January 2026 in any case. And it would only be next year that we would have to decide, because we'll decide the fees from now for a whole year. Is that correct?
please.
I agree, Councillor. I think any discussion about whether or not the ULEV discount should apply to those that are no longer early adopters, but I guess adopters, should be a decision that you make this evening, because this budget will fall into that time period, and any subsequent amendment would be pushing uphill, I think, to make a significant change. I will say that, yes, if all of Hackney carriages suddenly switched to ULEV and their licence fees were being charged at the lower rate, that is a cost that the licensing authority will have to bear. But I will point out that that means at the following committee, it may be that an increase in fees have to be recommended to ensure cost recovery is found at some point. But if you wanted to make a decision now about what happens in January, then we can consider that in time for the budget that would come around this time next year, which will be after the adoption date.
All right, thank you. So I think, yeah, we understand where that is. I'm seeing some nodding heads, but I don't want to sort of say I understand fully where the committee stands on this. Are there any representations anyone would like to make, or have any concerns about the level of fees, where they would be in January 2026, especially if anybody thinks that they should stay at the higher level at that point? But yeah, Asima, thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm supportive of the proposal for the licensing committee to bring back a report. And just to say, it would seem a bit counteractive, like a bit of a punishment if in January they go to ULEV and then they have to start paying a higher fee again. It doesn't seem quite right, to be honest. So yeah, I look forward to that report.
So just to be clear, Asima, that we've just discussed that we wouldn't get a report because we need to make a decision here.
Yes, sorry, yes, yeah.
So from what you're saying, you'd support that basically what we've got here is what, £354, which is obviously substantially less than the 470.
Yeah, because if they're going to invest into making their vehicle more ULEV, and then at the end of it in January they still have to increase their fee quite a lot, it just doesn't seem right to me personally.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of comments here. So is there anyone else, Councillor Miles and Councillor Upton, do you have any other comments on that? Otherwise okay, I'll start. I saw Councillor Upton first, and then Councillor Miles, thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree with Asima that it's, we've recognised that it's extremely expensive to move to having an electric vehicle, and so we put in this early discount. So I think I guess our options tonight are to say we will leave these as they are, which would mean that from January 26, everyone will suddenly be in the sort of early adopter discount, and that will then stay through till the next budget process in April next year. I'd be happy for then that so there'll be 4 months then when everybody will be on that low one, and then to have some report, we then need to know, because I guess at that point we would then be losing money slightly on this, but just for a few months, and then at some point to come back then, well, okay, what is then the fair rate if everybody is going to be on the same tariff?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a question for Joshua, just to clarify. So do the Hackney carriage vehicles licenses, do they get charged just one-off at a particular month per year rather than on so what happens therefore if, for instance, in September you had a non-electric and then you've been converted to electric? Do you pay based on whether you had a non-electric one at the beginning of the year when your fee was taken? Just to clarify that, thank you.
Sorry, in my brain that ended up being two questions. The first being, how does the renewal process take place? So a vehicle license lasts 1 year and renewal takes place no later than 28 days prior to the renewal anniversary. That may be in any month of the year throughout the year. What exactly happens to those vehicles that renewed after the January date and before a renewal comes round? I don't think that's a decision that was ever put in concrete in regards to how that transition happens as of the hard deadline. I think the licensing authority or the licensing department's recommendation on that point would be once that deadline hits, any renewal afterwards should then meet the new requirements, which means that it may take a full year for the rest of the vehicles to then be ULEV. But as we say about the cost and that hard deadline, I think that would be the recommendation of the council, generally to support the trade in that transition. If what you are looking for is to ensure Hackney's that transition between the deadline and any new budget coming in afterwards, my recommendation would be not to amend the existing ULEV charge, ULEV discount, but instead maybe a councillor propose and introduce a new charge that is from the ULEV transition deadline. Any renewal application can then have a ULEV discount rather than a early adopter discount, because that early adopter discount was introduced by previous committees to support early adoption. And so I would just recommend, if you think there should be an additional line in there with an additional fee that says from 2026, ULEV Hackney carriage vehicles, and this is the fee. That I think would be the simplest in terms of administration of charges.
Motion then that we consider.
Please put your mic on.
Sorry, should I move a motion then to consider the recommendation that, well, to support the recommendation that the officer has tabled, that we add this additional line that any renewals that take place after the 1st of January 2026, but before the new budget round, are considered as the ULEV rate. I think that's how I understood it.
Yeah, happy with that. So happy to second that, councillor. So should we take a quick show of hands to see if there's support for that in the committee, please? So committee is minded to unanimously support that proposal. So I think we can sit with that now. And I don't know if anyone's got any further comments, but we've given this report a good going over, really. So really, thank you very much, both of you, for your contributions. We draw to a close that item now, Mr. Khan. So thank you for your representation. Oh yeah, we have to vote on the report. I'm so sorry. Right, so we're now voting to approve the report that we had before us, the fees and charges for 2025-26, which wasn't just the taxi charges, of course, as we pointed out earlier. Okay, so all by show of hands to approve the report. All right, thank you very much, councillors. So now we're. Okay, yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry. So were there any abstentions or, okay. Thank you, all right. And were there any votes against? Was that an abstention, councillor? Not an abstention, no. So it looked like we had 3 abstentions then there, was it? Yeah, okay. Were there any votes against? Okay, thank you, councillors. Thank you for your patience. So moving on to, thank you, Mr. Khan. Just to ensure that everybody's been looking at the correct agenda, we did get a reissued agenda. So just to be clear that the report of item 4 was withdrawn, so there won't be any report for item 4. So we're moving straight on to item 5.
Excuse me, Chair, sorry, can I interject? Is
Yes.
it possible to have an explanation as to why the item was withdrawn?
So officers were not in a position to present the report, and there's nothing more to be said. You can certainly feel free to inquire further if you wish, councillor, but I couldn't say any more on that now. So yeah, just to be transparent, the original title of that report was the Hackney Carriage Quantity Control Policy Review, but that report was withdrawn. Okay, so we move on to item 5. That's the miscellaneous licensing update.
May I go get the miscellaneous licensing team from outside?
Yeah, is that David? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Matthew and Nicholas. We have before us the miscellaneous licensing update report. And I don't know who's presenting to start with. Matthew, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is intended to inform the General Purposes Licensing Committee about progress that we have made since the last committee meeting. And so I'll start as in the order of the report. I won't read it word for word because you all have it in front of you, but I'll just run through the headlines as they appear in the report. So the main news this year was that the payment licensing regime changed from its temporary incarnation brought in to assist every business in town through COVID period into a permanent licensing regime, which represents a sea change in the street scene of Oxford. I had a little look at some figures, and in 2016, we issued around about 11 cafe licenses, which is a much more onerous process to get a license to stick tables and chairs outside your business as it was then. And that required planning permission to be sought. As you can see in the report, this year we've issued 91 payment licenses. So it now is the way businesses like to expand their footprint. So you can almost double your number of covers at your business. And I think it's working really well. I think it has changed the street scene for the better. But that is now our permanent regime. That's in place for us to administer going forwards. Introduced, as was explained to the committee in the previous hearing, we can now take enforcement action against premises that transgress. We have the ability to serve notices, and the premises themselves have the security of knowing they have a 2-year license instead of just a 1-year license, and they can vary it, renew it as they please. It's been a tremendous piece of work for the team going through the year. The arrangements for that process did come into being maybe a little bit later than we would have liked, but that seems to be the way of it. And so it was all hands on deck, and we seem to manage to get a good result for pretty much everybody involved. It did involve a little bit of visiting premises and giving some advice in person for a few of the later applicants. We are introducing an online application facility, so paper applications will no longer be required. It will go straight through our website, which will streamline the process even further, making it a little easier for everybody, including us. So it'll be an efficiency saving for us too. At the last hearing on the 5th of February, the committee requested that we prepare a report setting out the feasibility of provisions for incentivising smoke-free and vape-free establishments. And that was for the committee to be considering in May 2024. This didn't happen because of the scramble, the draw on resources caused by the introduction of the new legislation. Unfortunately, there simply wasn't capacity in the team to produce or research such a report. The comments we would make are the bullet pointed ones in the report you have in front of you. There are already some provisions in the national conditions for providing smoke-free seating. It is a requirement that appears on the payment licence conditions, which are annexed to this report. And if we do receive complaints, in fairness, we haven't really received many complaints in this area, but if we do receive complaints, it is something that we will visit the premises, we give advice, we have the capacity and facility to serve notice or take whatever enforcement action we see is appropriate in line with the guidance and legislation. Point 9 asks that the members decide whether to pursue the possibility of incentivising smoke-free payment licences any further, having had regard to the bullet points above. And I'd say that there are a few things in those bullet points which might give the members something to consider when they're thinking about whether they want to go forwards with this or not. We've got the tobacco and vapes bill to come into force. We don't know quite yet what form that will take. And the existing provisions as well, and also that I think it's worth bearing in mind that a lot of the premises that have pavement licenses are, of course, licensed premises who cater to a large set of their audience, maybe too large in many people's eyes, but certainly part of their audience do smoke, and they will want to provide a provision for those people. Moving on to street trading and traffic management controls. We've done a lot of work this year with the county council, working in partnership with them. In fact, we've worked hard to strengthen our communication pathways with the officers in the county, with a particular view to regularising our street trading locations in the town. And so that's been an ongoing project to have them incorporated into the traffic regulation order, marked out, and the benefits of that will be they'll protect the traders going forwards, and provide us with some security of those spaces being there for the street traders in the longer term. We've taken forward the principle to the Joint Working City County Active Transport Group, acronym CCAT. The process being more widely applied to several of the street trading sites in the city, which are located in or near traffic management controlled areas. This also ensures that our street traders can be incorporated into plans for those areas going forwards. We wouldn't want to be an afterthought in those processes, which are quite involved and lengthy. The officers have set a programme to review and regularise each trading site. It was originally scheduled to be no later than March 2025. The date has now since been extended to March 2026. And the cost of this project is to be proposed to the Development Review Group. It's estimated the costs will be around about £30,000. The time of the project will take between 12 and 18 months. The BRT team manager, Nicholas Cox, my colleague next to me, has been taking this forwards, and I'll pass you to him for a brief update on that particular process.
Thank you, Matt. Just to say that we have come to the point where we may have exhausted all avenues in respect of trying to regularise the bays and overcome some of the problems that are associated with our partnership working and with our partners at Oxfordshire County Council Highways. So I propose that the committee allow me to pursue the Development Review Group to see if we can secure the £30,000 that's required currently at the moment to progress this project. Most of those applications will be between 12 and 18 months. So the clock is already ticking on a problem that we only have about 12 months to solve. So I think trying to move on this as fast as we can would be preferable at the moment. So the next Development Review Group meeting is on the 19th of February. So if you agree that that is the way you'd like to progress, then we can start that application process. I'm currently looking for a lead councillor to sponsor that particular application.
Are you looking for a volunteer there, Nicholas?
Yeah, it'd be good to possibly identify somebody now at the
Yeah,
beginning of the process.
okay. Well, just what's involved, Nicholas, before we just, in terms of commitment from the councillor, just so people can
I think from the councillor, it's just making sure they're aware and they can give advice as and when it's necessary. But the project itself is really about applying for the traffic orders, and the process is well documented. It's just the timescales it takes.
I mean, it's helpful to have potentially someone who's got a sort of county responsibility, arguably, but I wouldn't want to kind of preempt. I know you put your hand up as well, councillor.
My point, yeah.
Please make a point, yeah.
So, I mean, I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you've done on regularising the trading locations, because I think this came up with a little blue van trading issue on Frideside Square and uncovered a larger issue. So I think, there's a gratitude that you've been able to do that work. I mean, I would like to then suggest that we as a committee put forward that recommendation that you've suggested, which is that the Development Review Group progress this project to proceed with the regularisation of these locations, because it's needed. It has to be done. Otherwise, it threatens, my understanding, street trading locations across the city, because they won't be operating legally. I think so. I'd like to put that as a forward. I wonder whether it's best coming from the chair of this committee as the official sponsor or the relevant cabinet member, but it's not for me to decide. But what I would say is that we've got devolution happening, and I understand licensing is kind of part of that question as well. So actually what might happen in 18 months' time is also an open question, but it makes sense that we start pursuing that. So that's why I'd like to put forward that recommendation. So I think we might have to vote on that as a group. But
Yeah, I'm happy with that, councillor. I think Alison, our legal advisor, has.
I think that the recommendation, councillor Miles and Chair, would have to be, as the officer suggested, that the recommendation is that you delegate for him to be present at Development Review Group. Okay. I don't think you can make a recommendation direct to Development Review Group that they should. Okay. So it would be an authorisation, if you like, from the committee to the officer to go forward to Development Review Group.
Okay. So then I'm amending my words that I put forward a recommendation that we as the committee delegate the officer to make representation to the Development Review Group on this matter.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, and certainly let's vote on the matters at the end, because obviously we need to decide on the incentivising of the smoke-free areas as well. So that we've got that on the table there. So thank you, councillor Miles. I know that councillor Liger, you raised your hand. I wasn't sure if it was to volunteer your services in this matter.
I did, but I was wondering whether there could be more than one, but that was my question.
Okay, so I mean, I'm happy to. Oh, Alison, yes.
I just wondered if I could invite the officer to clarify what being lead sponsor would actually mean. So when you say you need a lead sponsor, what's the action that you would need?
To some of the other policies within the council.
Yeah, okay, so it's kind of vague at the moment, but we can continue to communicate on this. Can we have two councillors so that we're ensured that we've? Yeah. So I mean, it could be chair and co-chair, or it could, councillor Upton, do you feel you'd like to?
Well, it sounds like it probably ought to be the relevant cabinet member, which would be me, and I'd be very, very happy to do that. Absolutely, yeah. Or the chair of the licensing committee. I think it should be one. So we could perhaps check which one of us would be most appropriate, and then do that. But I'm very happy to.
Okay, well, we won't dwell on this too far. Have you got a comment on this one there, Jazz?
Okay. I think he should be chair of the committee, only because you'll be gone in May. So whoever the chair is could carry on the work, sort of thing. That's the
It
reason.
might also be gone in May.
Or it could be the cabinet member, then it's just a bit confusing, that's all.
Sorry, councillor, are you saying that you're aware that councillor Upton isn't going to be here from May 2025?
Become the Lord Mayor, that's why.
Okay, so she can't be on cabinet. Yeah. Got it. That's very good. Right. So we don't need to dwell on this too much, I don't think. I don't know if you had a sort of point that was,
The point is, before you nominate someone, you need to make sure that they're going to be here after May. So you need to find out. I'm saying I'll be here.
Okay, so to be clear, I think the natural place for us to be, okay, Alison, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, but it's the last comment, I promise.
Yeah.
In which case it might be safer to actually nominate a role, which would be the chair of the committee, no matter who it would be.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, so we could keep the chair and the co-chair in the loop on this, I think is fair to say, so that it's not resting just on one individual. I mean, that would be who is in that position, whether it's now or in May. If you're happy with that, Nicholas, then we will ensure that that line of communication stays in place. Yeah, okay. So, Councillor Clarkson, are you happy with that
I'm happy
situation?
with that, yeah.
So you've got myself and Councillor Clarkson as chair and co-chair for that team for now.
Great, that's a formidable force. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. So was there anything more to add? We perhaps, I don't know if we'd reached the natural end of your report or whether you're ready to take questions and comments.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Nothing particular to add that isn't already on the paper. We've got 34 street trading consents. 2 of those have naturally gone during the year for various reasons. We've got a couple of new applications. They'll be heard next week, so we might actually back up to 36 by the time the minutes of this meeting come out. And overall, the comment at the end of that is always true. Even whilst I was preparing for this hearing, we received another street trading application and an inquiry about street trading pitches that might be available in Oxford, which is a constant theme. We do constantly get inquiries about where can people trade and can they trade. And many of those don't get to fruition because many speculative businesses don't. There's an investment that has to be made, and the practicality of it can be overwhelming to begin with. But we do receive a lot of very serious inquiries, and a fair few of them do continue to come on to be traders. And I think that concludes the report. I haven't got anything else to add to that.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll now go to the floor for any comments and questions in relation to the report, in relation to Councillor Marr's proposal earlier as well. And also, obviously, we do have a decision to be made in terms of the incentivisation of smoke-free zones for the pavement licences. So perhaps I'll take groups of 3 again. I don't know how. Yeah, let's do that. So, okay, so we'll go Councillor Ligo, Councillor Ottino. Are there any other comments or questions? So, Councillor Upton. So in that order, please. Thank you.
First, I'm going to apologise. I'm going to go back to the Development Review Group. My apologies if I missed it. Who sits on that?
Councillor Ligo, you're looking at me, but I don't know. I think we may have to ask the officer actually, who's actually the person that's been proposing to attend. I don't know who sits on Development Review.
Yeah, we'll take, sorry. Yeah, we'll take the questions in groups of 3. That's right. We'll take the questions in groups of 3. So that's the first question. Who's on the Development Review Group? And Councillor Ottino.
I think I'm right in saying a pavement licence fee might be £500 or a renewal of 350. I mean, I don't really see how reducing that to 0 maybe for people only offering non-smoking is really that much of an incentive. So I wonder whether we'd be wasting our time to investigate seeing if we can incentivise it, because I'm sure more than £500 could probably be made by a business wanting to have people smoking, probably expected to make more than £500 out of offering tables that had smoking. So I sort of think we shouldn't waste too much time on that. And it seems like what we've got already through law, that there have to be some non-smoking tables as well as some smoking tables, is adequate. And otherwise it'd be a waste of officer time.
Okay. Councillor Upton.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Ottino's made a really good point there. I think it's tricky. You've got to balance public health against businesses thriving. So my first instinct is we should just make them all smoke-free. So rather than financially incentivize them, because I think Sam's absolutely right, that if we knock £100 off the licensing, I don't think that's going to be here or there for people who depend on having smokers at their business to make it thrive. So I think the really only options are make them completely smoke-free, and with a public health perspective, that's probably what we should be doing. But at the same time, I can see that that could be disastrous for some people's businesses. So that's a difficult thing to weigh up, which I'm currently weighing up in my mind.
Not easy. We'll take them in groups of three. I'll come to you for the first.
Yeah,
That's this next
it's a
group.
debate rather than.
Oh, do you? Well, let's enter debate after the questions, if that's all right, councillors. So you've got your three questions. If you're ready to field those, please. Thank you.
So the first one is, it's on the internet, I think, on the website, but I haven't written them down. I don't know who's on that board.
All right, look it up, councillor. Okay, but we'll look it up. Yeah, look it up and tell us. So then, just to Councillor Martinez. Sorry, apologies. Do you have an answer to Councillor Martinez's point?
Yes. So question two, and question 2 and 3, which are sort of fairly similar. Yes, you're absolutely right. The fee for a brand new pavement licence is £500 for 2 years. The renewal fee is £350 to renew for a further 2 years, and any other 2 years after that. I would agree that perhaps it's not a huge incentive to discount off what is effectively a £350 ongoing fee. Maybe not enough to form an incentive. That's a political decision, but one of the factors into that is that it'd be worth bearing in mind that if we were incentivizing the provision of smoke-free seating at a discounted price, it is likely to generate more work for officers if we are to respond to complaints and do enforcement on premises to keep them smoke-free. And of course, it's the licence fees that pay for the officer time to do that work. The other question 3, which is very closely related, is can we make them completely smoke-free? Of course we can if we want to. It would be a policy decision. It might be one that we'd want to attach to a specific pavement licensing policy if we were going to form one of those. But yes, it would be possible. Yes, you can. The national guidance allows for it, although it provides in the central part of the guidance for a provision for smoke-free seating as opposed to making it entirely smoke-free. But it does allow you to make your own decision as a local authority and decide that you're not going to have any smoking in any of your pavement licence areas, or presumably set categories on that if you wanted to. Again, I would suggest the difficulty with licensed premises and providing a point of conflict there, because people will still smoke in licensed premises because people are addicted. And if they aren't smoking in the pavement licence, in the licensed pavement area, well, they will smoke and vape somewhere. And so what you might find is that, similar to the introduction of the smoke-free legislation in 2007-8, it pushes smoking elsewhere. And so you create consequences for noise pollution, usually, into areas where it previously hasn't been. But that's something to bear in mind when you're moving groups of people around licensed premises.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Upton, sorry, Councillor Miles, have you got a question or comment?
Yeah, I guess it's a question to. A question to inform our debate. Is it feasible for us if we were to recommend smoke-free terraces, pavement licences, to restrict it to daytime. I think when we discussed this previously, there was a lot of support from committee that's what to look at incentivising this practice because it's aligned to our policy objectives in terms of public health, but also the regional wide policy objectives for smoke-free Oxfordshire. But particularly children are affected maybe during the day who are passing by. And we know that the level of enforcement isn't what it should be. Some cafes do have ashtrays on all seating, even though they shouldn't. We know that happens and it's difficult to enforce. But if we could have it, would it be feasible to have it for those that are like the cafes or operating during the day in public spaces on the pavement? Thank you.
So I'll just let Lois Mudderman come in. So if we have Lois, and then are there any other questions for a group of 3 questions? No? Okay, thank you, Lois.
Thank you, Chair. Similar sort of follow-up to Councillor Miles's question, just a question for officers. Rather than incentivising smoke-free areas by giving a reduction, which I understand the difficulties to do with sort of administration, etc., can we flip it? Is it legal for us to, instead of doing that, to charge a surcharge if licenses have more than 25% of their space being used for smoke? I don't know if we're allowed to do that.
Okay, those are the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Is it feasible to, the first question, is it feasible to restrict smoking to evening only, essentially, and have no smoking only during the day? And the answer is yes, as far as I can work out. It would be a specific condition. The national guidance 4.3 says, where an authority has set a local condition covering the same matter as a national condition, which is smoking, which takes precedence. The locally set condition would take precedence over the national condition where there is reasonable justification to do so. And it would be for the people setting that condition to make their justification. And you've already mentioned a couple, the protection of children might be one of them. So yes, you could set conditions as you see fit, providing there is justification that backs the placing of that condition onto a licence. Question 2 is about, rather than offering an incentive for smoke-free, could we charge a surcharge for smoking premises? You probably could. I'm less sure about this. One of the reasons is that the fees, we'd have to change the fees. The fees are at their maximum levels, so it's £500 and 350, and we have no ability to charge sums on top of that. So the law would prevent us from doing that. So what we would have to do is we would have to investigate whether it would be possible to lower our fees sufficiently to then charge a surcharge on top of that.
Yeah. So the answer's no.
All right, thank you. So I know Councillor Ligo's got a question. Are there any other questions for now? No, okay, well, I'll ask a question after. Yeah.
Question, because following from Councillor Miles, I'll be more intended to push for daytime because there needs to be a little bit more consultation on how this is going to work. So, for example, the Black Sheep next door, the cafe, which City Council owns the buildings, what we could do is push people from there and push them, for an example, outside the town hall, where there's benches and smoke bins, right? We have to think what, and we're supposed to be, as a local authority, smoke free, but we still have outside licensing, ashtray bins outside our council buildings. It's all about enforcement, and we still haven't got anywhere with that at the moment. So my concern is where you stop one, you create another issue, which you was alluding to before. And I just think we just need to take a bit of advice and see what local business is saying as well. So it's easy to implement things and rush things in there, but if we're going to do it well. And I'd rather we slow things down to get the model right. Because what we don't want, for example, some cafes in residential areas, you'll move them from there and there'll be 3-4 houses down. And, you know, I'd rather we just take our time on this to get the right decision, that's all.
Yeah, thank you, councillor.
I don't know.
Is it, I mean, there's a good point on the daytime. I mean, there's obviously one of the issues with allowing smoking in a public place like that is that it's obviously got an impact on children, both their health and also potential uptake of smoking by children. And if it is a daytime sort of, you know, smoke-free area, you're going to cut out a lot more sort of young person child contact, really. So my question was, so in the report, it does cite other local authorities, success with other local authorities. So that's from Ash, isn't it, that cited the success. So do we know these other local authorities? Can we compare ourselves to other local authorities that have had success with smoke-free zones for the pavement licenses?
Chair, I'd need a little bit of time to find out who those local authorities are. And then it would also be worth looking at how they came to that decision, and how they're implementing it through condition, and whether it's working any good. I don't know if Ash lists these on their website or anything like that, but I can have a look and see if there's a quick list.
All right, thank you. In the meantime, I know Lois has put her hand back up as well. Are there any other comments from anyone not spoken yet, or Jazz yet? Any more for any more? No. Okay, so we'll go Lois, then Jazz, and then I'll ask your questions, and then we'll ask the officers to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to bring to the committee's attention a stat I read recently, which is that the numbers of passive smokers getting lung cancer is increasing sort of exponentially in a way that it hasn't done before. And obviously, passive smoking is when you're not a smoker, but you're exposed to other people's smoke. So with that in mind, and certainly with public health in mind, I would definitely support Councillor Miles's suggestion of having a daytime ban on smoking.
Thank you, Councillor. Jazz?
Yeah, Councillor Liger, what you said, I agree with that up to a point. But then Officer mentioned that, you know, if you take out total smoke-free zones, they just move down the road. But that's still a choice. So especially in the daytime when there's children, people take their children to a cafe or something. If there's some smokers that want to move, that's their choice. At least the children are sort of protected. So I kind of go with Councillor Miles on that. But I get it. It doesn't have to always be in the evening. It could be a group of people in the daytime that are there together in a pub or something, watching football in the summer or something, and they can't smoke, so they move over. But actually, because there'll be more children in the daytime, they should be more protected, I think. So that's kind of where I sit with that.
Before officers answer those two questions, I see that Joe has just raised a hand as well. So if Joe, you could ask your question.
I just wondered if the statistics on passive smoking extend to outdoors as well as indoors. Good question. I don't think the report I read said that, and obviously it's less outdoors than it is indoors, but nonetheless it still is there. Sorry, that's not a very eloquent answer, but I think you understand what I mean.
All right, very good. Thank you. So you have to answer those questions, please. Thanks.
Oh, could you repeat the first question, please?
First question was from Lois.
Sorry, that was a comment, really, rather than a question.
So Ajaz has asked a question though, in relation to Councillor Ligo's comments. As well. Yeah, so apologies for that. Yeah. Okay, so I know that Alison has found out who's on the development review group, so I'll hand over to Alison to point that out to us. Thank you.
Yes, in the intranet, we have a project management office, but development review group is chaired by the head of regeneration and economy, currently Carolyn Plazinski, but I believe she's maternity leave, somebody else, I don't know the name of the person. And then there's representatives from legal, finance, corporate property and assets, regeneration and economy, planning, ICT, corporate strategy, community services. And then there's the administrations from the project management office. DRG has a budget, and I believe that the officer would be filling out a form, submitting it to the development review group, who will sort of challenge, ask questions, provide guidance, so on and so forth. But ultimately, I suppose, be giving approval for the project.
Okay, good. You got
I have got a question, and my apologies. So we don't invite anybody from the public health team. So I've had these discussions with my other hat on a regular basis with public health, but I don't know where those conversations go. But we haven't asked those questions. The public health are leading on ASH and a few other initiatives. Okay, that's why I asked who's on the review group, because we would need more evidence, wouldn't we? We would.
Yeah, well, in terms of evidence, I'm thinking on my feet here, but I think it would be down to the officer to be gathering more evidence. I'm presenting that to the development review group, I think is the way it would work. If you're looking for more evidence from ASH, that is definitely down to an officer to be. If you feel that there would be more evidence needed before reaching a decision, that would be down to requesting that from officers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's in. Yes, Louise. Yeah, thank you, Louise.
So I was going to suggest that in terms of what we're doing today, we can, the recommendations are to note the current position of various things, so we can do that, and then decide whether to pursue the possibility of incentivising smoke-free pavement licence areas. I think we're probably going to decide not to pursue that. That doesn't seem to be like a good idea, but ask for a report on whether looking at 100% smoke-free pavement areas during the day is feasible, is a good idea. I guess I don't know if we need to consult on that a bit with the trade, would that impact on them too bad?
That's Councillor Miles' proposal, and I know you made a proposal for the other thing as well. Yeah. So I'll hand over to you to make that proposal, and then we could vote on those two suggestions. Yeah, thank you.
So the proposal for the reference to the incentivising smoke-free pavement licence areas. This is a recommendation to request officers to explore a daytime smoke-free pavement condition and bring a report back to the committee based on the rationale that this is aligned to the objectives related to protection of children and public health, and aligned to council and wider public health policy objectives.
Very, very nicely put. Okay, so do we have any comments on that particular proposition, which is on number 2, really, on our sort of second decision? Any comments, questions, obviously in relation to Councillor Miles' proposal there? Yeah, I've got 2 here so far. Is it? You want to come back as well? Okay, so we've got 3 comments on this proposal. Okay, so we'll take those comments, and when we've fielded comments, questions, we'll go to a vote on this. Thank you. Councillor Attino, and then Councillor Upton, and then Councillor Ligon.
Yeah, I don't think I can support that. I mean, addiction is an illness, and I don't think this is the way to approach people overcoming that addiction. I think we need to look at supportive, well, not necessarily us, but the government, need to look at supportive measures rather than prohibitive measures. I think what we've already got, and that seems to be based on the law, is adequate enough in that you've got separate spaces. I work with people with addiction, including smoking. What will happen is we will just be getting a takeaway coffee and sitting in a graveyard or whatever, or some other place that is also in the open air. I don't think we need to be supporting people to make changes in their life for their health, which will also benefit for all our health. I don't think we should be going any further in making restrictions on them. I think it's clear that it's obviously worked stopping people smoking in pubs and cafes, but I think outside spaces, I think that's different. There'll be nowhere for people to go. Well, they will go somewhere, and it will be unenforceable. So I think it'll be a waste of our time to consider that.
All right, well, we'll continue fielding questions. I think it's fair to say that officers did consider this to be enforceable, otherwise they wouldn't have suggested so earlier, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. If you do have a comment on what I've just said, then feel free to come in. But we'll go to Councillor Upton and then Councillor Ligo. Thank you.
It was just very brief to say I wholeheartedly support that, and I think it accords with our, certainly the county signing up to be smoke-free Oxfordshire by 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Upton.
As I alluded to earlier, I completely understand what were you saying about the daytime. I think we should do something like that, but I feel I don't want to make a decision yet. I feel like I'm going to abstain, to be honest, because I want more information. I would have liked to have had a few more workshops, with businesses. I'd like to have some comments from public health. I'd like to have some comments from organisations like Turning Point, where Simon alluded to about those with addiction, having an understanding of that. What does that mean? Are we going to push more people to public spaces to have their coffees or whatever they're drinking in parks and green spaces, which could cause another issue? I want us to be a smoke-free Oxfordshire, and I think we all do by 2025. But realistically, I know there's some talks actually wait until 2030 because we need to have a look at this. And if we're going to do it well. Let's not rush into something which is going to contradict. And when it comes to enforcement, actually, we have lots of enforcement in different departments of this local authority. And actually, we've got a backlog of work when it comes to enforcement. So we will struggle to enforce. And, with the amount of licence, I'm not going to ask the question, but there's lots of licensed premises and it'll take a lot of officer time, and we could be setting on the wrong foot. I would just like to slow things down and get it right. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, that I'd like to speak to lots of all the organisations and some workshops going forward. This is why I alluded to again about the development review group as well. But again, it's about that local knowledge as well. So I will abstain on this.
All right, thank you, Councillor. I don't want to necessarily sway your vote on this. Just to be clear that we are voting on pursuing the possibility of incentivising smoke-free areas, and so the proposal on the table is to pursue the possibility of pursuing that as a daytime restriction that prevented smoking on the pavement licensed premises. But that may not change your mind. But we're not here and now immediately making a decision that comes into force here right now. Yeah, so I'm going to go straight back to Councillor Miles for now, and then Jazz, and any other comments on that, please come back as well. Matthew, thank you. Yeah.
So I just want to say that this is about a vision of the city that we want to create for us and for the children and the visitors. And we have to think about what's under our influence and control. We can't choose, whether people are choosing to smoke or not. That's their business. But what we can do is say that we don't want the people to be smoking on the terraces of the cafes that we're licensing during the day, because it will have a public health impact, which has a cost to society ultimately, as well as an individual cost. It will also mean that people with children, certainly, I'm not going to take my children sit on a pavement terrace if someone's smoking next to them, because I know what it does to family members if they then, end up with smoke, with lung cancer as a result. So, it's not to be taken lightly. I understand that, but this is why we're requesting officers to look at what's feasible and if it's been done elsewhere. And there are fewer people smoking these days. I mean, yes, it's a small number of people will be affected who smoke and want to sit there, but actually, proportionally as a percentage of the population, there are many fewer people smoking than there were in the past. But it is an issue, and it should take into account vaping as well. I think that's important. But think about the vision and the future we want and the health of our nation, I think. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Jazz?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Edward. Yeah, I think what Councillor Miles said is exactly right. So it's about the perception as well for children as they grow up. If they see people smoking, you do that out of habit, that becomes normal. So I take on board what Simon said. However, smoking or not smoking has gone so far forward now that it's kind of accepted that in most places you don't smoke. So people do have an addiction, I agree. But it's more manageable in the fact there's more acceptance that that's not what happens now. So therefore, I would say the overriding issue is, and officers are only exploring at the moment. They're only going to check in, and I'm sure they're going to check in with businesses as well. So we have a full report, but it's about protecting not 2030, but children that are 5 or 6. The less children see people smoking, the less liable they're likely to smoke. So that's what we want, a norm for the future, not 5 years, maybe 10 years, 20 years.
All right, thank you. And Matthew, were you happy to come back? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just answering the earlier question that was asked about how many councils Ash has signed up to ban smoking. And it's 3 councils, it's gone to their website that I can find. There's South Tyneside, Manchester and Middlesbrough. They variously ban smoking but not vaping, or smoking and vaping. So it's not consistent between the 3 of them. And I was also going to point out in terms of enforcement as well, certainly this would come with a hefty enforcement requirement. And I think a very crucial factor in the consideration of whether to introduce a policy that banned smoking during the daytime is the times, and that time of transition when the premises might start to put out ashtrays, because then you might have to manage conflict in some way, and we'd be looking to work out how to make sure that process didn't generate any conflict in various premises. So yeah, just to point out the times would be a particularly crucial consideration of that process. And,
thank you very much.
It would rely on enforcement.
Yeah, so we've had good share of comments there, some indeed against, and obviously those that are for. Unless anyone's got any further comments on it, I think we should move to a vote on this particular proposal to pursue the smoke-free pavement premises during the day. We haven't specified times, but obviously as this is proposing to pursue it, we're not suggesting that we as a committee are sticking on a particular time, but we are saying daytime. So I think we all sort of understand where that sort of stands. So if we're ready for a vote on that, then please raise your hands to agree with that proposal. Okay, and any against? One against, and any abstentions, as promised? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. So now we do need to move to. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, could you propose that again, please, Councillor Martin?
Oh yeah. So the earlier recommendation was what the officers had put forward to us, that we request that they are delegated to explore with the development review group the addressing of the issue of the license, the street trading license consent on highways.
Yeah, the street trading bays. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So do we understand that we're asking officers to pursue that issue of the street trading bays? We have seen that in the past in relation to the little blue van, which was parked up on Frieswide Square, and there was a kind of an issue as to whether it was allowed to mount the pavement and get into that position. So, I'd suggest that's a very sensible proposal. I don't know if, we haven't pursued comments on it, but we could move straight to a vote on that if nobody's got any other comments. But, yeah, so if we're ready, then I'll take hands for agreeing with that proposal to ask officers to pursue that. Okay. All right. Are there any votes against that? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So we've got that. That's an additional recommendation, really. So in relation to the whole report, I mean, we need to vote on noting that report as well. We've obviously had quite a lot of discussion rightly about the smoke-free zones, but if there are no further comments on the report, we could move to note that report. So all those in favour of noting that report as it stands? Thank you. Okay, are there any votes against noting the report? Any abstentions? Okay, all right. So point two, we have decided to go with what is in effect an amended point two. Yeah, so we have the committee has voted by majority to go ahead with pursuing the idea of smoke-free pavement. That's true. Yeah. Okay. That's a fair point, councillor. We could revisit that as a. We should vote on that. Yeah. So. Yeah. Yes, yeah, okay. Apologies, councillors, for that. Okay, so just to be clear, and we may need to take another vote on Councillor Miles's proposal there, because I haven't worded that correctly. So it is in relation to point two, we are requesting officers to pursue the possibility of daytime smoke-free pavement licensed areas. Yeah. So if that's not how I've said it before, my apologies, but we'd need to take another vote on that just to be clear that I hadn't got the wording quite right there. So all of those in favour, if it's the same, then yeah. Of course, yeah.
So we're asking for the report instead of point two of the incentive, yeah? So the incentive's gone. We've decided to kick that out of touch.
We're rewording it. Yeah, that's that. So our recommendation is to recommend Councillor Miles's proposal instead of voting on point two as was provided, because we've effectively discussed the daytime restriction rather than incentivising establishments. Apologies, Al. Apologies, yeah. So it's about pursuing the possibility of daytime restrictions on smoking on the pavement licensed premises. Okay, that's what I've got to be very clear on. My apologies for that. So
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I think it's really important that it's clarity that the committee just voted on requesting a further report from the officers. So it's pursuing it by presenting a further report. So there would, the clarification that I wanted to bring is that you're therefore going to be bringing this back for a further decision pending a further report.
yes,
I didn't want it to be pursuing, going ahead with a decision. I wanted it to be pursuing further reports. Is that?
Sorry,
just want to be
Chair,
clear.
can I just mention something?
yeah.
In regard to timescales of such a report, we are just about to move into our busiest period for the year. So really, we're looking probably past, well, beginning of April, middle of April, before we're really going to get to grips with this. So I'm just sort of reality checking what we can deliver in the timescale. So if you're expecting us to come back within 6 weeks, I don't think that's possible at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to accept the timescales that are available to officers. We're not going to push any more on that. I think if the proposer is happy to still move that proposal, then I think we should still vote on it as is. And yeah, the timescales are what they are. But we, yeah, just to be clear that we are talking about a future report, and that's what we mean by pursuing the possibility of.
I just wonder if we can put can we do it by and set a date? So by July, or can you give us a date that you think would be so that we can put a date?
Yes,
Chair, the next committee is in May, so it could be by the next committee.
Yeah.
May. If May is possible, that's when the next committee meeting is in, is May.
21st of May, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, officers.
Sorry, Chair, is that realistic, the timeframe? I mean, because, sorry, the office, is it really? I mean, would it be best later on? If you're going to do it well. Don't try and rush things. And if it's 6 months, it's 6 months.
I would prefer it.
But then that's what we should be doing, because we've got the review group. We're waiting for other partners to come back as well. And I'll suggest at least 6 months, if I can make that.
Just to make it clear, the development review group is nothing to do with the smoking. It's actually to do with the positioning of the street trading. So that's a separate issue. But if the next meeting is in May, if that's not feasible or practical, then it would be the first meeting after May of this committee, which is usually, I think, September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we do have the dates and times of future meetings in the agenda. So, you know, if it's a report that comes to us in September, then I think that's what we'd have to. It's a fair point that a decision is best made well rather than soon. So I still need to take the vote on it again, though, in terms of the exact wording. I think we've gone over it enough times to understand where the wording should be. So all those in favour of that proposal, please. Okay, all those against? And abstention? Okay, we'll draw that to a close now, councillors. We've done item 5 to death, so thank you for your patience on that. So, Nicholas, I don't know if you're presenting item 6, miscellaneous licensing fees and charges.
Yes, I am, Chair, thank you.
Yeah.
To figure out how we're going to pay for all this. The purpose of this report is to seek agreement to the licensing fees and charges should apply for 2025, 2026 for those activities where the council has discretion. This report does not cover the fees for licensing and gambling act activities, which are reported separately to the Licensing and Gambling Acts Committee. The fees and charges detailed within this report are found at Appendix 1, relate solely to the functions of the business regulation team. A further report will be provided to the members in relation to the fees and charges related to the functions of the general licensing team. The statutory principle in relation to the setting of the fees is that they should be reasonable, proportionate, and not exceed the cost of the procedures and formalities of the relevant licensing scheme, including staffing, training, administration, testing, inspections, hearings, and regulation. The licence fees set by the council are administered in the miscellaneous licensing function within the business regulation team and comprises the following: acupuncture, ear piercing, electrolysis, tattooing, animal boarding, dangerous wild animals, dog breeding, pavement cafes, pet shops, exhibition animals, riding establishments, street trading, and zoos. Members are asked to note that the fees have been revised and minor increases applied to cover the authority's costs due to inflationary pressures. The pavement licence update. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 makes permanent the provisions set out in the Business and Planning Act 2020 that streamline the process to allow businesses to secure their licences quickly. Licences are deemed to have been granted should remain in place for such period as the local authority may specify in the licence, with a maximum limit of 2 years. The existing licence with no end date are extended to 2 years from the commencement date. The proposed fees may be seen in Appendix 1. Currently, there are 91 pavement licences that have been issued. The council is responsible for collecting licence fees for these functions, and predict income from the licences fees is included in the council's budget estimates for 2025 and 2026. The power to levy fees is contained in the legislation relevant to each function or in the Local Government Act 2003 in relation to discretionary services. Fees and charges should reasonably represent the costs of carrying out the function. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. So do we have any questions on the miscellaneous fees and charges? So we're going to take them in groups again. We've got Councillor Attino, Councillor Muddiman. Any further questions? No? Okay, just the two for now, please. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so these are at least double the increase than we saw for the other charges. That can't just be because of inflation or wage costs going up. Were we undercharging before? And can you explain the 400% increase? Is that because we were completely undercharging on that one?
Thank you, Lois.
Those were my questions. Thank you, Simon.
So to be honest, that was my question as well. So I think you might have all of your questions.
Okay, so I had a quick look at what's been happening in the last 5 years. I think that's a good view of where we are with the increases of fees. So 21-22, there were no increases, just coming out of or in the middle of COVID. 22-23, 1.78. 23-24 was about 4.9. 24-25 is 4.5, and then 25-26 we're at 9, which gives you kind of averaging out of about 4.2% over those 5 years. So historically, not a large increase, really. It's just this year we've caught up, I think, really on what maybe we should be charging earlier on in those years. And the reasons behind that are that we have managed to secure all the debt that was developed during the COVID years, and we've put in place a debt provision project team, and currently we stand at zero debt owed to us through that process. We have a full complement of pitches at the moment, and as my colleague Matthew said, people ring us on a daily basis to chase those pitches. So I would say that there is a strong demand, and probably there is further demand in the future that we may be able to satisfy. Inflation will fall, and I don't believe we'd be doing an increase of 9% next year, probably more in the region of 2 to 3%, which would then balance out even below probably 4% over those 5 years. So I don't think it's an unreasonable ask at this moment in time.
All right, thank you. Are there any further comments and questions? Lois, yeah. Sorry, Lois.
Thank you, Chair. There was Simon's other question about the 400% increase for the, which has gone from 100 to 500 for the pavement.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a strange anomaly in as much as it's over a 2-year period for a renewal. We're only talking about a new licence of 500. So you have to split those over 2 years, whereas before it was 100 years for each year. So you'd have 200 instead of 350. So it's not far off where we were. And I actually did some maths on what the difference would be for the 91 pavement, and there isn't much difference between the two. We're not quitting because of the new pavement licence scheme.
All right, thank you. And the fees and charges as proposed, they're not revenue generating, they're more or less meeting the costs of the schemes to actually impose those licenses.
Yeah, solely for the team to manage, enforce, administrate, consent, and communicate with the public and take advice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Tino needs to come back. Is there anyone else who needs to come back on this report? We'll take a vote after that. Thank you.
I still don't understand why all these fees have got a 9% increase, whilst the other fees around that we discussed earlier have got 4 or 5%. The same, COVID applies to all these things, and whether and we didn't put up fees before. We have to justify this. I suppose the other question is, some of these things is actually, how many people actually apply for some of these things? And if we made it the zoo 5% increase as opposed to 9%, is it actually going to make any difference to our income? If it's only like 1 or 2 people applying for some of these things, if I was suddenly had a 10% increase, I would want to know why.
You're saying 10.
But I suppose at the risk of repeating myself, it's basically to manage the whole process of these functions. And the street trading function is one of our main functions. It takes a lot of our time, as does the payment license.
Yeah, okay, so we'll take just one more point now. There's no more points, so we'll just take that last point, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on from that, so obviously, you know, this paving license it's a new thing, so it's going to take time to work out what the costs are. Probably starting costs are quite high, but you know, the other charges like dog breeding and stuff, they're probably going on for a while. Have you put the increases in isolation, or is this like the whole department kind of increase, and it's worked out to be roughly the same across the board? If that's the question.
For the miscellaneous licensing function, or
yeah, so you've just added to all of them.
Well, there are differing ratios that we've added, but yeah, the general, I think it's within about 2%.
Yeah. So they were taken individually.
Yeah, but see, this includes things like operational delivery. So we've just employed a new business regulation compliance assistant to assist us with the administration of these new processes like payment licenses.
All right, thanks very much, councillors. So we need to vote to approve these fees and charges, because obviously we've heard about the increase, but also heard that those charges are meeting the needs of the licensing team to actually administer those charges. So if we're ready to vote, please, if all those in favour to agree with those charges? All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's passed. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience today.
Thank you, Chair.
You've got a point. You're right. Yeah. So we'll move on. We'll move on if everyone's ready. So you'll be pleased to hear we've finished the main items in the agenda. So we'll move on to minutes of the previous meeting, which was 20th of May last year. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? I only had one quick question about this, because it is in the minutes about the little blue van. I have noticed that my understanding is that's permanently closed. Do we know why the little blue van has gone?
Chair, yes, the little blue van is permanently closed. And the reason is, I don't think he'd mind me saying, is that he found he could do better working at the job he came from. He could make more money from that. And so he went back to do the job he was doing before. I think someone made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Wow.
So he took it.
So it sounds
although the little blue van is not gone, it's still doing events here and there. So it just won't be on Spragwise Square anymore.
There we go. So the little blue van was made an offer he couldn't refuse. I think that's a good way to end the main part of the agenda. And we'll move on to item 8. Sorry, we do need to approve those minutes. So notwithstanding that, if we don't mind to minute the fact that the little blue van is gone. And approving of the minutes of last May. Okay, any rejection of those minutes? I've got 20th of May there. So those are the minutes that we're approving as 20th of May. I've not considered the minutes that are not in the agenda. We'll move on to item 8, dates and times of future meetings, 21st of May and 22nd September. Okay, all right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.